As I grow older, I find myself talking more and more to groups of people about sex. I kind of worry about this a little bit, naturally. Does everybody talk more about this thing as they grow older? Or do I really have something to say? Well, I don't know. I don't know why I would have anything particular to say, because I'm certainly not an expert in this area. But I think that Jeanette and I have at least found the ability someplace along the line to communicate. And I think that everybody needs to communicate, needs to pause now and then and stop and think through just what they are as sexual persons. And by the way, before we start, I'd like to introduce you to a real expert on sex, the gal who taught me everything I know, my wife Jeanette.
He always introduces me as an expert, but I don't claim to take any credit for this knowledge, as I didn't know much either. Anyway, I'm in the studio listening to what he has to say today, and I hope his comments will help you to communicate.
Well, thanks, Jeanette. And now that we've both established the fact that neither one of us are experts, we can say any darn thing that we please without any experts contradicting us. And so I'd like to start with a kind of a simple idea, one that I think it took us all of our lives to learn. And this is that sexual intercourse is not what you do. Sexual intercourse is what you are. Not what you do. It's not the things that you learn. It doesn't have anything to do with techniques or positions or anything of this kind. What sexual intercourse has to do with is what you are as a person. Because everything that you are all day long, how you treat each other, how you feel about yourself, how you feel about each other, how the kids act, all of these things are part of what you are, and all of these things come to bed with you and make love with you every time that you make love. In other words, to get this in some sort of a perspective, we're talking about real human people making love. People that have colds, flus, headaches, sinuses, bunions. They have days when they're hurt, days when they're upset, days when they're worried about how to pay the taxes, how to make the payments on the new car at the bank. All of these things come to bed every night. And once in a while, maybe, there's an almost perfect day. And maybe, once in a while, on this perfect day, we can make perfect love. But all of the rest of the time, we're people. We're human people. So, perspective again. One question as we conclude this first little chat and try to give you something to think about. How many perfect days do you have in your home? I've got a friend by the name of Dick Ayers, and I've known Dick for a long time. He's a kind of a sarcastic person in some ways, but I think a tremendous thinker and a phrase maker too. One of these kind of guys that can always come up with a word that exactly describes things. And one day he was sitting up in our office, and he was reading one of the latest books put out by some eminent authority on sex. He sat there for a while, and all of a sudden he growled in disgust. Another one of those great orgasm in the sky books. I've never forgotten that expression because I think it characterizes so much of the phoniness and falseness about sex that we're constantly hearing. The great orgasm in the sky. You know, you pick up this novel and a boy goes out and he meets a girl. Quite often this boy is 35 or 40 years old or 50 or more. And they gaze into each other's eyes and they find something there that is tremendous. And so then they go to the nearest motel or tourist court and they make mad, passionate love. And she goes into instant ecstasy. And it's beautiful. It's dreamy. This great big orgasm in the sky. What does this kind of thing do to real people? People who perhaps go through most of their lives, or perhaps all of their lives, without ever experiencing this tremendous climax. People, as we said, that are ordinary, that have ordinary days, and that have to somehow meet each other in love. How does this affect us? Well, I think most of us feel like big failures most of the time. Why should we feel like failures? Why do we need to have this tremendous happening every time we have sexual intercourse? In other words, what is sex all about? Is it a place where we prove ourselves? Or is sex a place where we love each other? How did all of us get so hung up on sex? What is there about sex that we always tend to overemphasize this thing? Well, of course, I can't speak for you. I don't know how you got hung up on sex, or even if you are, but I kind of suspect you are. But I can tell you how I got hung up on sex. It's a kind of a simple process that started in my own home, where this is something that we just didn't talk about. Never. Not under any circumstances. I can remember one day where I learned this lesson of we don't talk very, very clearly. I must have been about 5 years old, and I heard a brand new word on the playground, and I thought, well, gee, I'll go ask my mommy about that. So I went in and said, Mama, what does screwing mean? You think she told me? She certainly did not. Instead, she hauled me to the bathroom and she washed my mouth out with soap, and she said, don't ever let me hear that dirty word again. A lot of other people contributed to my hang-ups too. I got some of these in the Catholic school that I went to, I'm sure, where sex was talked about in terms of two words: fornication and adultery. Nobody told us what these words meant, but we knew that they were serious words. Don't do this sort of thing. Well, this went on all through my childhood. And then I started to get my sexual knowledge. I can remember some of this, getting it on the roof of the barn and watching a couple of dogs mating down below the barn. And some of my older buddies snickering and laughing, and everybody pretending they knew what this is all about. And all of this got us thinking and concentrating on sex most of the time in a very, very phony way. It exaggerated the thing. It made it so darn interesting. Got it all out of proportion. Now, these things don't stop just simply because a person gets married. The feelings and emotions that we start out with are still there. And this is why all of us have to back off, I think, and look at this thing as it really is, and learn somehow to talk about sex to each other. It's not an easy job. As I mentioned before, Jeanette and I have worked on it all of our lives. And maybe, someday, if we're ever reincarnated 1,000 years from now, maybe by this time we will have solved all of our hang-ups on sex and sexual intercourse.